Good morning, everybody. I hope you're doing well. Good morning, Boreja, bonjour. Um, it's great to see you all coming into the chat. Welcome to this fourth day of practice together, if you've been along for the ride the whole way. My name's Milla, and I'm going to be your guide here. And I'm based in East London, in sunny Walthamstow. And just to mention before I get into things, that this wonderful platform, Sangha Live, runs on the community's generosity. So the sharings are freely shared. And then if you're able to support, that helps us, helps Sangha Live to keep everything going, and the teachers to be supported. And there's various links and so on in the emails and in the slides that you can see. And we really appreciate generosity. So I've been practicing since about 2005, and Martin is my main teacher. Most of my work is around shifting systems, climate justice, and social justice, supporting charities and campaigners and activists and other organizations. Making change directly, whether to laws, norms, institutions, or supporting organizations and individuals to be powerful and well in their work. So I think a lot about these intersections between the Dharma and these kinds of practices, social change practice. And so that's kind of the theme, always the theme of what I'm sharing. And today I'm thinking about rest, joy, and ease in the practice and in life and in our work. And this can be, in its own way, fairly against the stream. It can be pretty interesting to think about it in that way. And I'm also relating it to the idea of dependent origination, the way all of our ideas come from other ideas, which come from people who came before us. How history and dependent origination can be really useful tools in our journeys of liberation, joy, and justice. So rest, joy, and ease. We'll practice with these today, and I'll say a bit more about them later. So in our practice, we'll sit quietly together, sit or whatever position you're taking. Maybe you're lying down, maybe you're standing. We'll start practice now. Feel free to make any shifts, any physical movements you like. Help yourself get settled, any stretches or wriggles. And finding a position that feels awake and also relaxed. I'll ring the bell to mark the start and the end, and I'll guide more at the beginning and then leave quite a bit of open space today for your practice. So starting with settling, allowing yourself to come to some stillness, finding a way to be in your body for this next half hour or so that is both relaxed and alert and comfortable. Perhaps taking a couple of slightly deeper than usual breaths, lengthening your spine on the in-breath and releasing the front of your body on the out breath, inviting any tension that might be in your face or throat, chest or stomach, to loosen at the edges. A few breaths like that can be helpful for me as we settle. And then this idea of softening, perhaps noting if there's any areas of holding in your experience or gripping, whether that is physical, emotional, or mental, and just inviting a very slight unclenching of any gripping. Doesn't have to happen all at once. There might be a place where you habitually hold tension. For me, that is my mouth, especially the back of my tongue. So I check in with that. Softening edges. And then coming into contact. Steady, embodied awareness of physical sensation. Perhaps where your body is meeting the ground. Coming into contact with the immediacy of that physical experience. You may wish to allow some appreciation or gratitude to arise for anything that supports your ability in the world to find rest, to find ease. This could be your practice, the support of friends and family, your sanghas, and even yourself in the past for prioritizing time and space for rest. Could be those who contribute to your economic situation, time and space for rest and ease, appreciation for these aspects of your life that support your practice. with this sense of appreciation and gratitude for support in mind, coming back to physical sensations in your body, choosing an anchor, maybe a familiar one, like your breath or the feeling of where your body meets the ground. Or maybe choosing a less familiar one if you'd like to experiment today. Using that set of sensations as an anchor in your experience, in the here and now, a place to come back to when habitual mind patterns arise and you notice and put them down for a minute. Thank you very much, but not now. Come back to your anchor. allowing your awareness to rest in your experience, and your experience to rest in your awareness. And if the busy mind is there, it's allowed to rest for a bit as well. I'll offer some inquiries which you can take up or leave alone as you prefer. The first one is there a way in which your meditation practice could be 5% more restful? Is there a way that you could feel more at ease? And if maybe there is, then I invite you to make that change. That could be through movement in your body, something like having a stretch. It could be very subtle, like moving your chin back by 1/2 inch, or letting your shoulders drop. It could be something invisible to the outside world. You know probably what it is. Could you be resting 5% more? And is there a way in which there could be 10% more ease in your experience? Is there anywhere where there is friction or tension which you are making, perhaps without realizing it? What would it be like to release that by 10%, maybe in your stomach, your face? Can it be looser, softer, as loose as possible without falling into sleep? What would it be like to be 10% more at ease? And how about any holding in your mind or emotions. What's going on there? Maybe in the same way, it's possible to explore a softening of that grip if it feels safe, if it feels good. Maybe not all at once. Maybe just the edge of your little finger of the grip, the edge of what's possible. What would it be like to soften habits of holding in the mind? Maybe find one and have an experiment. And now, as we move into the last section of our quiet practice together, I invite you to practice with sukha as your anchor. Sukha means sweetness, pleasantness. You might say rest, or ease, or joy. Are there any places in your experience where there is sweetness? Explore resting your awareness in those sensations, soaking in the experience of sweetness in your world, right here, right now. transitioning now back together. I'll share some thoughts, and you're welcome to make comments or questions about your meditation experience, about anything that's occurred to you. And you're welcome to keep your eye a little bit on this idea of sweetness and sukha in your experience, transitioning it from an inner practice to a collective practice, or practice in the flow of activity. So recently I was chatting with a colleague, and I mentioned that I had been too exhausted to do what I had planned at a particular time, and I decided to rest instead. I had reached that point where it felt like there was almost no option. And she asked me, she said, "This might be a weird question, you don't have to answer, but how do you rest?" And it really made me think. So apart from literally lying on the floor or staring into space or doing domestic tasks or going for a walk or sleeping, one of the things that came to my mind was having unstructured time and time away from a sense of urgency. I can be a real urgency addict. I don't know if anyone else can relate. And it can really help me sometimes. I almost enjoy it. But it's not useful all the time. Particularly if I become dependent on it to get things done, like needing adrenaline to get things done. I think that can get a bit much. And also, it's almost like that button gets stuck on. So I might have nothing scheduled for the whole day, and yet I find myself rushing from task to task, or rushing through a task, even rushing in meditation, or even rushing as I make a cup of tea in a day with nothing else to do, making a cup of tea in a hurry. It's, when I think about it, it's very strange. And so, what do we do as Dharma practitioners when we notice a deep pattern? I think it can be useful to think about the history of that pattern, its deep roots, its sources in dependent origination, this idea that we are made of streams of phenomena interacting, which themselves are made of streams of phenomena interacting. My urgency has no separate existence. It's not locked in me. It's the product of many other streams of phenomena. So where did they come from? And we can ask this with curiosity and compassion. So if I ask where is this coming from for me? I relate it quite closely to the sort of pervasive mood of our culture, where the values of the market, the values of the economy, are somehow made the best values. So there becomes a kind of background music or atmosphere, like the capitalist realism I mentioned the other day, Mark Fisher's idea, where being productive, particularly of things related to the market, like money or market value things, and being busy, so busy and productive, and particularly being busy being productive, they're seen as good, sort of unquestionably good. They can't be criticized, and they're better than the other good things. And I think I've absorbed this all in my life, from my family of origin and the whole culture, in a way that it's kind of in my bones. It's sort of in my body. This sense that it's good to rush, that work is best. I must get to the next thing before lunch. So, how to unhook, how to lift that stuck button, how to notice in the Buddha's words that we're holding the hot coal, the metaphor that through practice we notice we've been clutching onto a hot coal and then we can release it. And I have a couple of suggestions from the Dharma, from my experience, and I'm sure you know about lots more, which you're very welcome to share with each other in the chat. We can have a kind of double stream. So we can look at it dharmically. How is this sense of urgency propping up my sense of self? It's like a craving. I'm clinging to it as it feels secure, and it makes me feel secure as a self. If I'm busy, I must be important. If I'm full of adrenaline, then I must exist as a separate person. And in noticing that I'm suffering from this delusion, perhaps I can unclench my grip a little, just maybe starting with 10%, the edge of my little finger. Another way we could look at it is in the embodied sense. So in my experience, if I know in my mind that something is unhelpful or an addiction, that's kind of not enough. Like, it's hard to break just by using my mind. If I want to stop rushing when I make a cup of tea, I can think all I like. Oh, I'm rushing when I'm making a cup of tea, but it doesn't necessarily help me practically to change the pattern, because the pattern is in my bones and muscles. I personally can have much more luck when I work with my embodiment. So where am I manifesting this tension in my actual form? I often lean forward a little. I often hold my breath, and I hold the back of my tongue in a kind of strange tension. I find it hard to describe. So sometimes when I'm boiling the kettle, I will lean back. I just say lean back. Or if I'm meditating, I can be almost meditating, leaning forward, as if I'm going somewhere. And so again, lean back. Soft tongue. And these interruptions can help the broader kind of web of causes and conditions to shift. My mind can't always interrupt my mind, but I can invite my body to interrupt my mind in a way that then things maybe can start to reform. And so what about politically or sociologically? You know, using our sociological imaginations, not just our individual imaginations. Thinking about power and social structures. Who benefits because I'm holding production and consumption as the highest goal? Whose pockets am I filling by rushing? Who is suffering because I don't take time to contemplate, use my imagination, and rest? There are so many different routes in my alignment with this urgency culture or this urgency addiction. Social roots, psychological roots, roots that I can understand through Dharma contemplation, historical roots. The philosopher Frederick Jameson calls considering history the radical imperative. Radical meaning at the root. Many of the Buddha's teachings are similarly radical, and I see a great alignment between contemplation of dependent origination and contemplation of history, the study of history in this way. So let's say I've seen some of these roots and I've been working with my embodiment and I've been having these contemplations. Maybe I can see that the anxiety I've been feeling is actually manufactured. the deliberately constructed phenomenon of late capitalism, and it's not natural at all. Well, it's actually a constructed phenomenon of early capitalism that survives, from the first factory clock, which changed our notion of time radically. So maybe this is a way that I can drop the hot coal a little bit. I can also stop worrying that it's my fault, that it's something wrong with me. I am stuck in an adrenaline cycle. I am failing at being a good person or something like that. I can see these patterns are huge and strong and go back for many generations. So I can trouble them. Maybe I can soften at the edges, but it is going to be tough to really be free. So I can lean back. I can insert pauses in my day. I can deliberately invest my time in things that are counter to the values of the market, like building community, building relationships, savoring joy and pleasure, working for systemic change, making music. I can uphold other people who do the same. And I might notice moments where I could trouble these patterns beyond my personal sphere. I can talk about resting as though it's normal, natural, and important, and not just something people do when they can't cope or because there's something wrong with them. I can talk about my urgency addiction, how it relates to capitalism, so that the invisible can be made visible for others. I could go to Whole Foods in Piccadilly Circus and hold a public discussion about the ways being owned by Amazon is a problem. I could go to Selfridges, right to the top floor, and ride the escalators all the way down, singing about stopping shopping. And as the icing on the cake, maybe I can do some of these things in ways that themselves generate sukha, or rest, or pleasure, or fun, that build community and resilience, reduce my anxiety, and enable a kind of collective unhooking from these exhausting cycles of manufactured craving, aversion, and delusion. Giving myself space to think, imaginative space, sharing this with others, and working towards the things that feel really important, even if that involves going against the stream. So those are my thoughts on resting, joy, pleasure, sukha, and their history. And time for questions now, if you like. And if no questions come, or while questions are coming, we can rest together in sukha. there's a writer called Adrienne Marie Brown who writes about pleasure activism. I talked about this a bit last year. I don't know if any of you were here. And she has this wonderful question, which is she's thinking about it in the context of social change and social movements. And she says, how can we make social justice the most pleasurable human activity? Which is just the most amazing koan. Okay, so someone says, I find stopping and noticing nature a great way to step off the wheel. Well, it's wonderful. And Victoria has a question. What led me to the Buddhist path? Oh gosh, what led me to the Buddhist path? I had a kind of burnout, pretty classic burnout, working in charities, and I just lost contact with what was important and was very, very exhausted and very, very on the wrong path for me and people around me. And I went through a classic phase of seeking. I went to Quaker meetings. I went to various different Buddhist groups. And I ended up finding a Buddhist center where I learned the basics of meditation. And then I did a 6-week course in What is Buddhism? And that was what really cracked things open for me, because I felt that I had found a set of ideas that brought together all these different things that I knew were important, but I had felt separate. And it immediately felt like my home and a path. There were other things that were happening for me, like I got some really good counseling and a couple of other things. Embodied practice, actually. I went into that quite deeply as well. But it was a really classic kind of burnout, seeking, and discovery for me. And then if we, in the older history, when I was about 8, no, about 10, I was staying with a friend for the weekend, and they lived in Hampshire, and the mother took me and my friend to Chittavivaka, the Theravada monastery down there. And it had a huge impact on me. And I think some little part of my heart just went, aha. So it's also thanks to that person, Amy's mother. We're pretty much on the hour. I'm going to wait to see another 30 seconds. And I will put the name in the chat as well of the author. She is a lot of fun. And she has some great podcasts, depending how you like to take in information. Oops. Adrienne Marie Brown. All right. Thank you, friends. And I look forward to seeing you tomorrow.